welcome to Books and Brews Light. We are on our 38th episode with our guest Clifton Pope today. So welcome, Clifton. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, without a doubt.
And you're coming to us, are you in Chicago?
I'm actually located in Corpus Christi, Texas, right along the Gulf of
Oh,
Mexico. Right.
okay. As I just mentioned, I'll usually Google people before I interview them, and I think there is a Clifton Pope somewhere in Chicago.
Oh wow,
So,
that's crazy.
yeah, there are actually 10 Clifton Pope's LinkedIn profiles.
Wow.
So with my name, they're finally somebody named Laura must have married into the Vosica family, so there are two of me now.
Right.
But most of my life there was only one of me, so I wish
Mhm.
she would help out with all my work, but whatever.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a lot of irons in the fire.
Yes. Well, to kind of give like a brief summary, of course, I was born and raised here in Corpus Christi, Texas, my whole entire life. Grew up, I guess you could say, with some humble beginnings, like my mom being a registered nurse, now a nursing manager with the VA clinic, my dad being a teacher and a coach and everything. So I kind of had the idea as far as like the health and wellness that you described, mainly from understanding how to take care of myself. With my mom being a nurse, I give her all the credit in the world for taking care of me all the times that I was sick, because most people don't notice I grew up actually having asthma as a kid, having to go to sleep with breathing treatments at night, having trouble wheezing and all that stuff. And the irony of that is that I was able to outgrow my asthma because of all the times that my dad, being the coach that he is, putting me in
Mhm.
all these different sports to keep me active. We would try, football, basketball, baseball, even some golf and tennis, did a little bit of martial arts, but I gravitated more so towards basketball and towards martial arts. So that's kind of what helped me develop, the discipline that I kind of have to this very day. Fast forward, I of course graduated from high school, a high school called 4H Moody High School here in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was the only person in my family on both sides to actually graduate with permanent honor roll, basically maintaining like higher than a 3.0 GPA, for those who don't know what that means. Then the journey gets a little bit interesting. I went to Del Mar Community College here in Corpus Christi, Texas, tried to figure out what it is that I wanted to do within the course of my life. So I'm a firm believer in one of the 10 commandments, honoring your mother and your father, right? So I figured, why not see which career path and try to find if my mom's career path would work best for me, which is what I originally tried, which was nursing. I realized that didn't work. I also tried, the kinesiology route like my dad did. That didn't work. Part of it was because I didn't put in like the full amount of effort that I really could have if I wanted to. And
Mhm.
also, hanging out with the wrong crowds, partying, doing all that kind of stuff, not taking life as serious. And then fast forward to about 2014, after going back and forth between the two majors I just described with my parents, I decided to, drop out of the community college and just try to create my own lane, create my own path, working all these different dead end jobs, I guess you can call it, working at, call centers, moving companies, worked for a delivery service company, delivery driver, all that. But little did I know, I was actually picking up like skills for within each job that I was working at, that I would transpire within my own entrepreneur business to this very day. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back at it, it kind of helped out. And
Mhm.
then one day I was having a conversation with my mom and, just, catching up with her like I normally would. She brought up, hey, maybe you should try to go to this vocational trade school called Southern Career Institutes and, become a pharmacy technician. And it was kind of like underneath the umbrella, of the medical industry, working with doctors and nurses to deal with people's prescription medications. And I thought I was in love with that at the time. And then I found out that I was. And so I understood what it was really about. But anywho, I got my certification through the Southern Career Institute's, the vocational trade school. It was a 9-month program, got certified through the Texas State Board and on the national level. Fast forward to about 2018, after being in limbo within the hiring process, as far as through Walgreens and stuff, based on an application error. That's a whole nother story within itself. But I got into Walgreens, got into working as a pharmacy technician, getting to learn the ropes as far as the conventional medicine side of things and how it impacts our health and our overall well-being. And then COVID happened, shifted the world like it did. And while I was, dealing with the worst of the pandemic, a couple of things came to my mind. Because I'm a very observant person and I always like to pay attention to certain things. I noticed that people who come into the pharmacy are never in the best of moods because they're dealing with doctors' offices, dealing with hospitals, dealing with insurance companies, wondering how come they can't pay for medication. So they're never in the best of moods. And then on top
you mean the customers coming in, not your other
the
employees.
customers and the patients coming
Okay.
into the pharmacy. Correct. Yes. And then when you throw in COVID happening and then that's where I kind of like lost the joy, honestly, of being a pharmacy technician, because then you had, the social distancing, the masks and everything we have to get through. We had to get vaccinated in order to keep working. And then I thought to myself, like, yeah, is this something I really wanted to do for the rest of my life? So you factor that in on top of the whole patient ordeal. I figured, whatever happened to, natural holistic practices, natural remedies. And here's my argument that I always tell people all the time, that don't get me wrong, when it comes to like a do or death life situation, doctors and nurses and pharmacies and all that will come in handy, especially when it's like antiviral infections, stuff like that. My only thing is that if you have like, like a bad cough or like a sore throat or stuff that you could literally cure with like grandma's remedies of like honey and stuff like that, take matters into your own hands and take care of yourself before you come running to the doctor's office, because they have enough stuff that they're dealing with behind the scenes alone. Then you come in with something as little as that can be solved in like 10-15 minutes. I feel like it's a waste of time to a certain degree, which is why.
Well, and when I have something like that, my question is always, what is the doctor going to tell me? He's going to tell me, have
What I
chicken
don't
noodle soup
already
and
know.
go to bed. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
So, and I find this interesting because I know people who do run to the doctor for everything. And in some cases, I know it's because of medical issues in the past that they do worry more. Whereas I was raised like, if a bear rips off your arm, we'll go in Monday when it's cheaper and quit your whining, So I'm more prone to never go to the doctor. And, maybe I go too far to the other side.
Yeah. So that it comes down to just, whatever happened to having a balance between conventional medicine and natural holistic practices. So I figured take matters into my own hands. Why not create, my own business and basically highlighting the importance of, as we were talking about before we started recording, movement, breathing, thinking, nutrition, hydration, and sleep, and mastering these 6 foundational principles. That way you can create healthier habits, not only for yourself, but establish generational health within your family.
Yes. That is so important.
Just because your whole entire family has had a history of, for example, diabetes or obesity doesn't mean that you have to be the next person in line. You can take control of your own health, which in return creates your own wealth, because health is wealth. Because we could chase after the next form of success, the next form of a payday, all you want. But if you're not healthy enough to reap the benefits of it, what's the point of living to begin with? I mean, that's the whole idea of why I established my company, Health, Fitness, Wealth Business, to establish generational health, generational wealth, and knowledge of self. Health, wealth, knowledge of self. And that's where the personal training, the nutrition coaching, the strength and conditioning coaching over time came into play, the exercise transformation specialist, all of those things. And then just utilizing the platforms like my own podcast to, of course, bring in people from all likes to tell their stories and share their expertise and experience on how they can become a better version of themselves, you know, providing their information, wisdom, and experiences, and just, hey, what does health and wealth mean to you, and how can we continue to grow and improve and evolve on a regular basis? And that's kind of like the theme of everything that I do, the theme of why I do all the things that I do. Like I said, from my personal training, nutrition coaching, the podcast, every book that I write, it all goes back to, you know, empowerment and to being the best version of yourself.
Right. You know, I do find it interesting how many people are following this same path in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, maybe a little longer. And, you know, I just find it interesting. It's like there's this mass movement away from saying, you know, I have to do whatever the doctor tells me. But I'm wondering, I guess my question, I kind of dropped it out of my mind for a second. I hear a lot about how what's in our food is causing a lot of our health problems, a lot of the obesity, and that I'm a little bit torn with what I hear. The people who are struggling with obesity, is some of it because of what's in our food, or do you think none of it is?
It has to do with, you know, it has to do with basically insulin resistance and all the stuff that kind of is in our food, from like the, you know, the refined carbs, all the different variations of sugar and artificial sweeteners that are in our food, not to mention like the food dyes, the coloring, the food dye colorings and everything that are within our food that can cause cancer. And there's so many different layers on how you could attack it, on what's wrong with our fruit. But it mainly just comes down to it, you know, being processed. It comes down to, you know, being enriched. It comes down to it being like, you know, bleached, for example, like white bread, for example, bleached. It's basically bleached in the production factories. That's the best example I can give of what's wrong with our food system.
Right.
It just
well, interestingly, one of the things my husband brought up a while back that I didn't know was, he said our meat is not naturally red, raw meat, that they're actually putting dyes in to make it look nice when it's raw meat. Like, why? You know, if we were used to, he said it would naturally look a little bit gray. And why not just let us see what it looks like naturally? And then we would think that was normal instead of putting dyes in.
Yeah, and it just comes down to them just trying to, you know, make the food as presentable as possible, just so it, you know, the big companies can profit off of it more so than anything. That's why I feel like they do exactly what they do. But it all comes down to just, you know, coming back to the principles of, you know, just treating food like medicine, and medicine being food, which is why we need to go. We need to eliminate basically the standard American diet out of pretty much society, because the standard American diet, if you look at the acronym of it, it's SAD. I mean that lets you know what kind of situation you're getting yourself into. You're getting yourself into this depression state to where you're causing yourself to want to eat a little bit more because you feel bad about it, which in return leads to the obesity and everything else that comes into play with that. It's crazy how, you know, the food system and everything is structured and stuff, but from how I look at it, it kind of just goes down to, you know, hey, sugar is what is making you fat. Fat is not what is making you fat. That's been one of the most common myths in you know, the food industry, is that you eat too much fat, it makes you fat. And well, if then that was the case, then why are people, you know, why do people love eating avocados, for example? That's a healthy that's just something that feeds into, you know, the good cholesterol within our body, the bad. But if you're eating like a whole bunch of sugar, you know, a bunch of like, you know, sugary products and stuff, then that and you feed into the bad cholesterol, then that's what leads to spikes to your high blood pressure, your cholesterol, the diabetes, and the obesity and stuff like that. Where I live here in Corpus Christi, Texas, we're literally known as one of the fattest cities in America.
Really?
Yeah, a lot.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, like people don't realize that. And I see it every time I walk outside, or even when I go to the grocery store, people piling, 12 packs of your favorite Coca-Colas and Dr. Peppers. And I'm just thinking to myself, looking at them like, seriously? Then you wonder why you're going to have problems with diabetes and obesity in the future. And then you're wondering, how did this all happen? Where did it all come from? What you
Right.
consume, what you put into your body.
Right.
Makes a difference. That's why they say you are what you eat for a reason. I'm just saying, it's a lot.
And I'm so glad this whole country, I was saying Wisconsin, I believe, is known as the fattest state. At least it was some time ago when I was going to college there. And that's a major reason my husband and I, too, we've moved to acreage. We're raising our own chickens and meat rabbits and sheep. We just processed our first sheep a couple months ago. So, we grew it ourselves. We've got a big garden. We're reinventing our lives. And this is part of why, I'm tired of being told you'll eat whatever we put in your food. Yeah, and you don't necessarily know what's in your
We're tired of the high fructose corn syrup, the artificial ingredients, the refined carbohydrates being low in nutrients and low in fiber. That is literally what they would call the 5 major food groups of our modern food environment.
And that's a horrible thing.
It's a horrible combination.
Right. What inspired you to start writing? What was that kind of motivation or process?
What inspired me to start writing, to be honest, was just, figuring out a way on how I can, of course, get my story and get my message out there to as many people as possible who can probably relate to the things that I'm going through. And it just comes down to, telling your story, really, because we all have our own story and that we like to tell. It's just a matter of just committing to telling it in the first place. And it's funny how you asked that question, because writing wasn't even part of my plan to begin with when I wanted to do this entrepreneurship journey. It just naturally happened. And let me tell you how that happened. Again, it goes back to me saying earlier, honor thy mother and father. I love them dearly. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't be who I am today, most importantly. But it was one night I was having a conversation with my dad. He was just saying, I remember him saying this specifically per verbatim, man, son, you have no idea how much of a hell of a life I used to have. It's so crazy. I feel like I need to write a book about this one day. And that's what literally sparked the idea, like, writing a book. I never even thought about that. I mean, I've been through a few things in my life that I want to tell some people. And it's like, it was me. It came down to me wanting to beat my dad to the punch as far as writing and publishing my book, which I winded up doing. And then fast forward, I've already written and self-published 5 books, and my dad still hasn't written a book, but that's a whole nother thing. But going back to just, the storytelling aspect, getting the message out there on why I decided to take the leap of faith into entrepreneurship. Why did I want to go down the path that I went down? And, letting people know how far I came and how far I've, of course, will continue to go at the right moment in the right time, which led to me writing my books like What's Wealth Without Work, Dollar and a Vision, End Times, What Is Your Revelation, going into the poetry realm on how we can overcome, the 7 deadly sins that lead to our destruction in life the majority of the time, telling people on how they can be committed and consistent and have a sense of urgency behind it with my book, Consistency with a Sense of Urgency. And most importantly, showing people how they can overcome their fears as obstacles that are holding them back, which leads to my most recent book, my second poetry book that I just released, called Fear Not. All of the books, obviously are available on Amazon, stuff like that. But to answer your question, as far as why did I get into writing, it was just mainly about me telling a story as far as how I started everything that I am doing, and kind of just leading people down like the breadcrumb trail of a path of like, hey, this is where I was at here. This is where I'm going to be at now.
Mm-hmm. And to help them do the same. Do you have a reading ready from Fear Not?
Oh yeah, I got a reading ready for Fear Not. I have it right here. It's
Go
my
ahead.
it's based. I'm just gonna do a little bit of kind of like the intro poem to kind of like that'll kind of summarize everything, where I basically say this: what is going on in my mind? Something seems strange because this doesn't happen all the time. Why must this spirit be so haunting, doing the most as it was taunting, trying to start problems and bring misery? One thing for sure is that this problem will be solved like another mystery. Do you believe in ghosts? I don't know, but I'm definitely not shook. I will embrace the Holy Ghost the most, so that is all it took. Who or what should I fear? Better question really is, what is fear? That's how I really feel. All fear truly represents is false evidence appearing real. Go figure, right? Even though when fear can and will trigger, what will it trigger? Fight or flight. We fight through fear to ensure that we will be all right. We fight to avoid any danger that arises any higher than the highest heights. Would we be in fear of those heights if we caught that flight? How impactful would things be if we missed that same flight? Fear can make you unravel. Fear can make you question how you travel. Our eyebrows may raise, but we must pull it together. Fear is temporary and it won't last forever. There is no need for this threat. There is no need to break a sweat. The sound of the alarm will not bring any harm. You are not alone or the only one. Fear can bring evil or worse, the loss of love for someone. Fear can steal our joy like a robbery. Then we wonder why we are stuck in poverty. Criticism floats around but never cares what they say. We all grow old every single day. Take care of yourself and avoid ill health. Make the most of it until the last breath. Embrace what is next in life after death. Now, do you believe in ghosts? You don't have to, but let me make things clear as I demonstrate to you, the people, how to conquer the 6 ghosts of fear. That's basically the intro to that intro poem that basically sets the tone to the poetry book Fear Not right there that I just read for all of your listeners, which is why y'all need to go get the book on Amazon so you can figure out how you can overcome the 6 ghosts of fear.
Right. Explain what these 6 ghosts are. And I was also curious, is this idea of 6 ghosts an existing philosophy or something you put together?
It's kind of like, an existing philosophy.
Okay.
I mean, are you familiar? You're familiar with the book Think and Grow Rich?
I've heard of it. I think I might even have a copy.
Yes. Think and Grow Rich. That's been like an influential, impactful book that's helped. I've learned so much from that book within itself. And towards the end, it has a section where it talks about, the 6 ghosts of fear, which is of course poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love for someone, old age, and death. Now, only reason I when I was reading it, and I've read the book like at least two to three times, but it was the second time I read it to where it was hitting me so much to where it's like, man, I feel like, at one point I've been there where I've had fear of all of these things at one point in time. So I figured, going back to, how we can overcome these obstacles to be a better version of themselves. It's like, hey, we all have had fear, if not of one of these 6 ghosts of fear, if not all of them at some point in time. Why not tell people how they can overcome each of these fears that they may be having as obstacles in their life in the form of poetry? So that's exactly where that concept came from. I could thank Napoleon Hill and the influence that I gained from reading the trademark book Think and Grow Rich, which led to, basically my poetry book Fear Not.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Now,
paying homage to it to a certain extent.
yeah. This is a fascinating concept to dig into a subject like this. I mean, there are millions of books of poetry about love, about nature, kind of general concepts, but to have a very focused how to overcome fear and to tell that story through poetry. I only know of one other person who's kind of done that, and that's me and my husband. We put together a book on what is love really, not, romantic, oh, I'm crazy about you kind of stuff, but what is the heart and soul of really loving another person? And we kind of told that through poetry and essays. So I found it fascinating to come across a book that tackles a subject like this with poetry. So do you have, say, a couple poems on fear of death and then a few poems on how to overcome that, or how does that work?
I literally, how I structured the book entirely is that I basically write one poem on each of the 6 ghosts of fear. I break down as far as like what the definition of, for example, poverty or criticism say is. I'll break it down as far as what it means. And then, that'll pretty much be like the majority of the poem and everything, and me delivering my perspective on what I think it means, of course. And then towards the end of each poem, I give like this sign of hope, that this sign of faith that, hey, we can defeat this fear. And I kind of leave like a nugget or two at the end of each poem as far as how you can overcome poverty, how you can overcome, the fear of growing old, how you can overcome, looking at, the fear of death and looking at it as like a rebirth more so than anything. That's kind of like how I structured each poem. It's not like multiple poems on each of the topics. It's just one nice long poem breaking down what it is and how we can overcome it towards the end, if you read carefully.
What even made you think of using poetry to talk about a subject like this, and why did you decide to go that way instead of, a self-help prose book on how to overcome?
A lot of people don't notice about me is that I used to do music at one point, as far as like writing songs and everything. So it's like the poetry aspect has kind of always been within me since, my early days in college, hanging out with the people I wasn't supposed to be hanging out with, making like, hip hop rap songs. So the rhyming and rhymes and all that has always been within me. I just decided to use it for something more positive and more uplifting instead of something as destructive as it is, I guess you could say. So I kind of figured, why not put some old talents and mix it with a new perspective? And that's kind of what led me going down the poetry route and stuff like that. Again, it was one of those things that I didn't plan on doing, but it just happened naturally. And it's crazy. I really started to take it a little bit more seriously in 2022 whenever I got invited to, open mic nights and poetry. And then, I figured, let me try it out and see if I can put something together. And then after hearing the reaction from people and a handful of people coming up to me saying, wow, I was so impacted by your poems, I could relate to it, this, and that. So then fast forward, I was like, I think I might be onto something with this. Why not write a poetry book about, talking about, of course, how we can overcome fear, or how we can overcome, pride or greed or wrath, or stuff like that. So that's kind of where that came apart.
Okay. Now, as I was looking at your Facebook page, it looks like you were involved with a play called Toxic. Were you an actor in that?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about that and how that came to be and what the play's about.
Networking is how that came about, as far as just, meeting the right people at the right time. And the whole idea about the Toxic stage play that I was involved in, I basically played actually one of the main lead characters in that play, which he's a character by the name of Reverend Brews. It was basically based on kind of like real life events as far as what's going on within the actual churches behind the scenes with like TD Jakes and everything like that. So it was kind of centered and based off of that. It was pretty much about, a corrupt reverend, you know, who was doing things with the money that was coming in with the church that wasn't supposed to be doing. He brought in, you know, his daughter to try to, cover the blame. He brought in pretty much the whole family to try to cover the blame, and it got to the point where it spiraled out of control. And then it got to the point where it was like, hey, you need to do something about this as far as getting things under control. And then it winded up leading to him resigning from the church and just trying to start fresh with a brand new opportunity. I definitely enjoyed it was like a theater stage play. It was done here in Victoria, Texas, which is about like a little over an hour away from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay.
I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to meet the writer, producer, and director, Miss Lorraine Duhart. And the funny story about it is that I remember, you know, she was posting on Facebook as far as, hey, I'm holding auditions for something for this play. I was like, I'm the type of person who always likes to try to create new comfort zones and try to step out of my comfort zone and see if I can do it or not. So I winded up going to the rehearsal. I rehearsed for actually a different part from what I actually got. I actually rehearsed for a smaller role, but the fact that, again, Miss Lorraine Duhart, the writer, producer, and director for it, she loved my voice so much to where she envisioned me being one of the main characters, being Bruce, and that's what led to the stage play coming together the way that it did. I definitely had fun with it. It was definitely a great experience, and hey, acting on a theater stage is it's not as easy as people think it is. You know, you have to. It makes me respect, you know, the art of theater and just the art of acting in general a lot more. You know, having to put in the time and the effort towards getting the lines down, all that kind of stuff. But it was a great experience. I would definitely do it again.
So you're looking forward to doing it again, hopefully.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely keeping that door open as far as, you know, see if another role were to come in the form of acting, as far as whether it's in a theater or the independent film. And speaking of that, the Toxic stage play, it's actually gonna become like an independent film eventually.
Oh, fantastic! Will you be reprising your role?
No, it's just a matter. It's actually in the pre-production stages and all that. So who knows? There may be a Toxic independent film coming, maybe within the next year or two. Who knows?
That's great. Would you be playing the same role again, or will they be having someone else?
I would hope that I would be playing the same role again. I would love to. And then it's like I was having conversations with Lorraine as far as, you know, about it whenever we would go up to Victoria, Texas to do, like, you know, the TV and the radio appearances. And she was telling me about how she plans on turning this into an independent film and how she would want me to be a part of it, as well as another independent film that she's also working on called Broken. So there's definitely an opportunity or two down the road. It's just a matter of, you know, going through the course, the pre-production phases and all that, and then everybody to where we can start shooting everything and stuff. So that door remained open.
Well, that's neat to hear. I'm actually going to be in my first movie this Sunday. It's a small independent film. And to be honest, I don't know what it's about. Sounds like he's going to do the filming all on Sunday, but maybe he's doing other things too, and only my part is needed on Sunday. So I will be playing the role of somebody dressed vaguely like a hippie or 80s hillbilly, pretending to play the fiddle. And I said, I can pretend to play the fiddle really well.
Yeah, I can do it very well. You just tell me what you need to do, and I'll do my best to make it look good for the sake of the screen.
The funny thing is, I'm going to have to go out to a thrift store and look for a pair of faded jeans because I don't actually own one. You know, even though I'm working on the farm here, my jeans are all ripped up. So I said, well, ripped up jeans too? He said, no. So I have to get faded jeans without holes, or he said a simple dress. So that's, I'm not sure. I'll have to go to a thrift store to find something. So one thing that really jumped out at me, your books are about the 7 deadly sins. The play is about redemption. Obviously, we're, you know, you have a lot of what would be or are Christian themes. And today, a lot of people are going to be like, that's not for me. I would disagree with them. But I'm betting you have some ideas on why these books really are for everybody.
Yeah, it just comes down to, helping, finding like, enlightenment within your life, having a sense of belief, having a sense of unity and within the course of your life that is centered around just, honor, harmony, peace, love, and respect, and just having a better compassion and understanding for yourself. That way you can understand other people as well, to where, again, we can have that mutual form of respect for each other, no matter how different our backgrounds are. It's just that sense of respect and that sense of peace that can make the world a better place by just, doing what you can to make a small difference and a small impact within the community that you live in, or any community that you go to across the world, and basically just bringing your world into their world and just making it one huge world, all in alignment.
Go through the 7 deadly sins and what they are.
The 7 deadly sins is basically pride, gluttony, sloth, envy, wrath, and greed. Those are the 7 deadly sins, as far as, what kind of breaks us down to where we get tempted, and as far as, falling down this path of, destruction and all of these things.
Right.
And I should.
And this is a major reason why I say when people hear the 7 deadly sins, they think religion, Christianity, don't want anything to do with it. And yet when you break them down, gluttony, that goes straight to what you started the episode talking about. If you're a glutton, you're going to end up obese and in bad health.
Yeah.
Pride, pride goes before the fall. And there's a lot of truth to that,
Yes.
if you get too proud, for instance, if you get too proud, you're not going to see your own faults, and then you can't fix them, and then you keep going down a wrong path. Lust, obviously, that gets a lot of people into a lot of trouble.
About lust. Yes.
Yeah. So to me, that's why I hope that even people who say, I'm not interested in these kind of Christian themes will realize, I've always said, God didn't give us rules for the sake of giving us rules and making us miserable. He said that's what's going to help you live a good life. If you're greedy, if you're full of wrath, talk about high blood pressure, if you're angry all the time. And so I think your book has a lot to say to everybody who just wants to know, how do you live a good life?
And it's deeper than just, the Christianity aspect, because you can make an argument that the 7 deadly sins apply to all religions. And it's like, because again, every religion has dealt with some form of, again, the lust, the pride, the gluttony, the sloth, envy, wrath, all of these things. But, to kind of overcome all of those things, and this is something that every religion has in common, we just have to get back to, the golden rule, because that emphasizes empathy and compassion. Treat others as you wish to be treated. If you treat somebody, disrespectfully, 9 times out of 10, that energy is going to come right back to you, versus if you treat somebody with respect and love and peace, that's eventually going to come back to you as well.
Yes.
Or it kind of goes to, the law of compensation, one of the 12 universal laws. You get out what you put in. If you put out hate, you're going to get that back in return, and then some. It may not happen right away, but it's going to be a little bit of a ripple effect that's going to come to where it's going to be one big punch in the face that's going to catch you off guard. Same thing with love. If you put that out more, again, it may not happen right away, but then there's going to be that ripple effect to where it's going to come behind you, and it's going to give you a nice big old hug of compassion and empathy and peace, more so.
I have a little bit of a story about that. As I said, we live on a farm. It's not a big one. I think we have 15 sheep now. We have only 6 rabbits. And about 15 chickens and a pretty big garden. But it does take a lot of work. And so we have a farmhand, and we had one farmhand And he was doing a great job. And one day he and I were lifting a big, huge auger up into the back of the UTV. And somebody who lives in the area came flying by on his ATV. And all of a sudden he stopped, he backed up, got off, and he said, "You guys need help with that?" And, we were fine. We didn't need help. But he said, "Well, I live just down the road. My wife and I both grew up on a farm. And if you ever need help," told me where to find him. And a couple months later, our farmhand moved back to his hometown. So I went and I looked, and sure enough, he needed a job, and it happened because he just genuinely stopped offering help. He didn't need to do that, and he didn't expect to get anything in return. He was just genuinely, "Oh, hey, it looks like that's heavy. I'll help you."
Right.
And what came back to him was now he has a job, practically walking distance from his house. He zips over here on his ATV, and, he can work for an hour. He can work for a few hours, whatever works with his family. And it's all because he decided to stop and offer help to two strangers.
Right.
So it really did come back. So what is your best advice for other writers as far as publishing and writing, or publishing and marketing?
Take basically is just, don't let anybody take control of your own story. You tell the story and have full control. And, just basically just, how do I say this? I would say just cut out the middleman and just take control of pretty much your destiny more so than anything, which is why I choose to self-publish. That way I can get control of, say, for instance, the royalties and stuff like that. That way it's being too split up as much. Just take control of your story and don't let anybody tell your story but you, because who can tell your story better than you? That would be my advice to anybody who's interested in, writing or self-publishing their own book. First and foremost, know what your vision and what your message is that you're trying to deliver. And then once you figure that out, the story will tell itself. And then when you get to the point where you're ready to self-publish, or publish the book, remember just to don't let anybody take full control of your story, and literally just maintain as much creative control within the process as much as possible. That would be my advice I would tell whoever's listening.
That's great. What's next for you?
What is next for me? Still going to be doing my personal training, nutrition coaching, still going to be doing my 2 podcasts that I have, the HFWB podcast series and the Organic Combat podcast. I'm actually going to begin the process of writing my next self-help book. That's going to be kind of like a continuation of the last self-help book that I wrote in last October that I released, called Consistency with a Sense of Urgency. I'm going to basically, I'm not going to say what it's about, but let's just say it's going to be based off of everything that I went through from 2024 of last year up to this very moment. Because what I do is that I always do a bunch of journal entries, like every single morning. Like I'll write down, like a recap of the previous day, how I'm feeling, thoughts, thoughts, emotions, all that stuff. Write down what I'm grateful for and everything. So I'm planning on going back into all of my journal entries from 2024 and up to this point now, and basically crafting a book on how to maneuver through the chaos, turmoil, and uncertainty, which is actually going to be the name of the next book, How to Maneuver Through Chaos, Turmoil, and Uncertainty, something of that nature. Because this last year and a half, man, I went through so much chaos where it was like unimaginable. Some of it kind of caught me off guard and threw me for a loop, but that's life at times. So it's like,
yes,
me just telling my story of basically the continuation of everything that I went through from where I left off in the previous self-help book. Because at the end of Consistency with a Sense of Urgency, I kind of leave that breadcrumb towards the end of, hey, I'll see you in 2025. I'll give you my thesis and my summary of my life then. So now it's about that time for me to give that thesis and summary to what's then. So I'm probably going to, after this Memorial holiday weekend passes, I'm going to probably go into, putting together that book, because my goal is simple. My goal is to try to release a brand new book within the seasons. I did the spring book, with my poetry book, Fear Not. Now I'm try to work on this next book and try to have that done by the end of the summer. That way I can reveal it to the world. And then, of course, just again, drop a book every season, 2 self-help books, 2 poetry books a year. That's my goal from 2025.
That's ambitious.
Yeah.
Although I do know some people who are putting out books about every 6 to 8 weeks, and to me that's crazy. But
Yeah,
I know people who do it. They write full time. They get up in the morning and they write for 10 hours a day.
Yeah, I don't know about 6 to 8 weeks. I'll do every season. Like I said, spring, summer, fall, and winter. That's what I'm planning on doing. So to answer your question, that's what's next on my list, is just, working on writing my next book, I actually have a couple of, appearances and stuff as far as like speaking opportunities coming up in the summertime, to help out kids who want to become writers, and giving advice in regards to that, and just finding different ways to continue to really motivate, empower, and uplift and inspire people. That's pretty much what's next for me.
And that's great. The world needs that. So where can people find you online?
They can find me on all social media platforms, primarily, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Instagram, they can find me mostly. That's where I have most of my action. Facebook is second. They can find me on Instagram at cpope_44, all lowercase. Facebook, they can find me by my name, Clifton Pope, or by my company, Health, Fitness, Wealth Business. I am on, of course, TikTok at healthfwealthb.cp. That's all lowercase and the abbreviated version of Health, Fitness, Wealth Business for TikTok's sake. Of course, I'm on YouTube. I'm working on getting my brand new website up and running, so that'll hopefully get done by the end of the summer is what I'm hoping for. There's been some setbacks there, but the comeback is coming for sure with that. But in the meantime, yeah, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Of course, I'm on YouTube, you name it.
Okay, so I hope people will go there. You can find me at booksandbrews.net. You can find me at lauravosica.com for all my books and other things. You can find our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn, at gabrielshornpress.com. Lots of great authors there. And you can see all our animals and sheep and garden and so on at glenmerrill.wordpress.com, or at Glen Merrill Farms on Facebook, which is actually where I do most of my posting. So our next interview is coming up. We have Clay Gilbert, who is here in Tennessee with me, so I'll be getting to meet him in person. He writes fantasy and sci-fi, and he will be on the Full Books and Brews podcast, where we actually pair cocktails, in this case, to his writings. And then on Books and Brews Light, we will have Karla Callen with her book, How to Find Your God-Given Purpose, which I think in some ways fits nicely with all the things we just talked about. So thank you very much for being on the program. It was a pleasure.
No, of course. And last but not least, of course,
cheers.
Y'all go and download and subscribe to the HFWB podcast series that's on Apple and Spotify podcasts, as well as my Organic Combat podcast with my co-host Kim Avalos. That's also on Spotify podcast. Give it a listen. That way you can dive into my world a little bit more. And thank you again, Laura, for the opportunity.
Thank you.
On doing what you're doing with your platform, Books and Brews. I definitely enjoyed the conversation. It was truly a pleasure.
Thank you. You too.